So let's dive into what we're really here to talk about, and that is making learning more snackable. Yes, there's that word again. So in my session today, we're going to cover how we've had to shift our mindset in recent years, what microlearnings are good for, and then how to break them down to make them much more snackable without sacrificing the value of your content. So the last 3 years have been interesting and challenging. And with that, we've had to shift our mindset. Within my company, one of the issues we're facing is that, we're hybrid, and that can lead to being on Zoom for extended periods of time. We all know Zoom fatigue is real. So in the remote world, we can lose our audiences for learning opportunities. So whether that means they disconnect or they just don't show up. Another challenge is that there's also so many more distractions at home versus, a controlled live environment. So we've got kids or pets. My husband likes to peek his head in to say hi about 20 times per day, which I love, but it can be distracting at times. So our traditional approach to live learning programs, has consisted of 90 or 120-minute presentations or even longer. But we've seen that it's becoming increasingly harder to keep our audience's attention. We know that the average concentration span of humans is really short. So if I only have 8 seconds to compel learners before they check out, I want to make sure that my content is really engaging and that it is the best. So the solution is to introduce microlearnings. So digging into stats around microlearnings, we find that microlearnings help reduce mental fatigue. So a learner can focus their brain on one topic and then take a break to recover. Next, we know that learners learn faster. So we found that while a learner might not have the time to sign up for a course that lasts for 2 hours, they will view a microlearning that might take them, 2 to 5 minutes to complete. So learners are able to complete more trainings because they're shorter. Next, microlearnings are good for personalized learning. So they allow you to personalize courses to learners to ensure that they get what they need. So learners are able to choose shorter pieces of information in a really quick way to get them what they need. So for example, let's say you have a long course on emotional intelligence skills. It covers multiple topics. There might be some learners out there that have had exposure to emotional intelligence skills, but they want a refresher on empathy. So creating that series of microlearnings can help the learner to zero in on the information that they need really quickly. And then last, they're great for helping you to take, these larger learning paths that can be really overwhelming and help you to give it to learners in measured doses while allowing room for personalization. So with all of that in mind, let's walk through how to turn a traditional training into something much more snackable. So to begin, I'd love to just gauge how comfortable you all feel making full-length trainings into snackable microlearning. So Christopher, let's launch this poll.
There it is. You can vote, everyone. So the poll is on the stage. Be sure to vote because some of you cheaters found it secretly before I officially launched it. But now everyone can participate.
Awesome. All right. So while we're doing that, I'd love to know, throw in the chat, why do you think some people don't feel comfortable with microlearnings? All right. I'm seeing difficult to make things concise, grew up in an old school era, not familiar, don't understand. Yes, it's rolling in. I love it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead.
Very careful when you ask for feedback from the chat. It comes a-flying.
I know. I love it. Okay, I don't see the poll on my side. I might be doing something wrong over here. I don't know if you all can see the results of the poll.
Well, why don't I give you the results of the poll with 353 official contributors. We've got about 21.5%, about 76 votes feeling super comfortable. So about a fifth of the audience feels super comfortable. We've got about 70%, 67 that are okay, but eager to learn more. The vast majority are in that camp. And we've got about 11% that are not comfortable at all. So there you go.
Okay, I love it. Great. And that makes total sense. I haven't always felt super comfortable creating micro learnings either. I've worried that I'm not doing it right. I still sometimes worry that I'm not doing it right, or that it won't be successful. But reaching out to colleagues and understanding what others are doing has helped me through that. And this is part of the reason why we're all here today. This is that moment for us to learn, to discuss, to be real about challenges that we're facing. And what I think is so cool about this microlearning conference is not only are we getting lots of good trainings and tips and tricks, but we're also building, a community of people that we can lean on and that we can bounce ideas off of and that we can grow with. So for the rest of today's session, we're going to walk through a real world problem that I faced when converting our traditional newly hired or promoted manager training into a series of snackable microlearnings. So the goal of this was, I wanted to convert a 90-minute training for newly hired and promoted managers into a series of microlearnings. So some of my challenges were the things that I mentioned: remote work, Zoom fatigue, personalization for learners, and then, of course, keeping the learner engaged. We know how important that is. So after I stated the goal, I then broke it down and extracted the most important subcategories from the training. So when I did that, these were the topics that I found within our existing 90-minute training. So we had hiring, one-to-ones, accountability, giving care and attention, recognizing achievements, feedback, communicating clear expectations, growing people, power skills, and then coaching. Then next, I knew I needed to keep breaking it down to ensure that these learnings stayed truly snackable. So I wanted to make sure that I kept breaking it down until I couldn't break it down any further. So obviously, we do not have time to break down all of these. So for this session, I'm going to show you what I came up with for the first one on this list, and that is hiring. So these were the subcategories within that topic of hiring. So we had new hire form, new hire hub, onboarding checklists for hiring managers, new hire start dates and onboarding process, hiring and managing a contractor, and interview skills. So I noticed 3 things right off the bat. So the first 4 things on this list were broken down as far as they could go. They could all go into one microlearning. Second, I noticed that hiring and managing a contractor is specialized, and not every manager is going to do that. And then third, interviewing skills could become its own microlearning. So now I had 3 categories, and each of these served as a script for a separate microlearning. So sectioning out a learning path like this makes it really easy for the learner to quickly get what they need. As I mentioned earlier, if I'm a manager taking this learning path who isn't hiring a contractor currently, I can skip that portion of the learning path, and I can use my time to focus on what is most important to me and to really maximize my time. So what I've found is that breaking up the content like this is really helpful for me to see all of the material I have and sort it into learnings that are snackable and that makes sense to the learner. So 7 Tops has been such an incredible tool for this. I've been able to create really compelling microlearnings in such a short time. And who saw the thing that came out today? It's brand new, the AI transformer. I just happened upon it today. It was kind of a game changer. I went to go make a microlearning, and I was able to upload a PDF into 7 Tops, and it produced a microlearning for me, which was pretty incredible. But it was a great way to get all of my ideas down and break down that topic for me. So check it out if you haven't. I'm sure we're going to be talking about it today, but it was really cool. So the last thing we're going to cover today is we're going to talk about how to maintain the value of our content when making it snackable. So one of my biggest pain points about turning traditional trainings into microlearnings is that I am always having this fear of missing out. What if I don't include something that's important? What if I lose, the zazzle of my training? So to ensure that we maintain the value of the content while making it snackable, let's talk through these best practices. So first, we want to establish the why right away. What is the learning goal or outcome? What do they need to learn and put into action? So a good rule of thumb here is to think about, sending an email to a friend. You don't have to do some long intro. You just get right down to business. So let's talk about interviewing skills as an example. what they need to learn is to identify skills needed to interview a potential new hire. That's my goal of the training. So notice I use the word identify. So using a concrete action word like identify versus a word like understand keeps it from being abstract. So it's going to be a lot easier for you to measure success at the end of the microlearning. Next, you'll want to continue to break down the sections further until you can't break them down anymore. So when you think you've broken down a training as far as it can go, look again. And this is going to ensure that you make the microlearning as snackable as possible. Next, bring the creativity, change up the sequencing, give the eyes something to look at, whether it's a video or infographic or even an engaging photo. 7TOPS, again, makes this really easy by allowing you to add polls and surveys and quizzes and other interactive materials to keep the learner engaged. So one of my favorite places to look for inspiration is in the inspiration section on the website. So there are so many examples of microlearnings, and it gives you, ideas on things that might be most engaging for your learners. And I know we're probably going to learn more today in the last session, which I'm really looking forward to. And then next, you want to keep it simple, sweetheart. So remember, this is a snack and it is not a 5-course meal. Next, provide additional resources at the end. So give external links, additional reading. This is such a great way to include supplemental materials for those learners who want to dive in further without adding, length to your microlearning. Next, you want to get feedback. As you heard me say earlier, I work for Momentive, who is the maker of SurveyMonkey. We love feedback. So sending a survey can be a great way to understand how your unique learners like to learn. So you can take that feedback, you can iterate your microlearnings, and it will really help you to gauge what your learners have learned. Another tip, and this is something I love to do, is put like a pre-survey in the beginning of the training, asking, for their level of comfort or expertise on a topic. And then at the end, ask the same question to gauge what improvement they've made in their learning. And then lastly, trust the process. It is a process. So stay open, try things, ask questions. Don't be afraid to iterate if something doesn't work. Your goal really is to get, your unique set of learners the tools that they need to be successful. So to wrap up, I would love to hear from you in the chat how you're feeling about putting some of these ideas into practice, some of these tips and tricks. Awesome. Better. Great. Well, I'm so glad. I'm going to welcome Christopher back up.
Yeah, well, now we get to debrief on this. So first of all, everyone, we got to do a round of emojis for that. So thank you, first of all, one, for breaking it down and keeping it simple, Samantha. Thank you for that trip down how to make microlearning. You see what I did there? Like that? I'm just full of them. I'm just full of them. I've been saving that one through the whole presentation. So yeah, no, I was looking forward to that. So thank you for that one, which, by the way, it's so funny, completely unrelated to your topic, and we'll pull some of these questions and comments up. The first time Momentum connected with me, I connected with Momentum. I had no idea it was SurveyMonkey. And it was so funny because we're on the call and talking about this. They're getting into their product stuff and the dots connected for me. So I think it's great. I don't know that a lot of people know that there's a parent company to SurveyMonkey. So one question that I have that did come through with this that I think is a consistent one. I'd love to hear your perspective on how you battle against the Franken course, because that inevitably is one of those things where you've got stakeholders that they want to just add more, and how do we get this in? And oh my goodness, we got to make sure they know this and all these other things. Have you had some secret tips that have worked for you to try and battle that back? I added another word for you there too, snackable. Now you have Franken course.
I love it. I'm going to add it to the lexicon of Christopher-isms. It's great. I think something that is helpful for me is to make sure that it is outlined. So if I have other stakeholders, making sure that they have access to an outline so that they can see that we want to keep it as simple as possible. We don't want to overwhelm the learner. So coming to an agreement before you even start that we're going to keep it simple. We have this outline. And if we need to, we can create a second course or a follow-up course, but we really want to make sure that we keep it as simple as possible.
Okay. Well, and I think that's one of the things that I know I've observed helps is when you're like, I'm not saying no, I'm just saying maybe not here. Like, let's
Mhm.
just not do it here. If we need to your point, let's experiment with this, see if it gets people the knowledge they need. And then if it doesn't, we'll add something else, but let's not jam everything but the kitchen sink into this and make it some monstrosity from Transylvania. Let's just keep it
Yeah.
out of that.
For sure. And I would also add, trust your expertise. A lot of times we get stakeholders who aren't necessarily learning professionals or know how to make a microlearning. They're just giving their, input or advice. So trust yourself that you are, an expert, a kind of expert. I don't call myself an expert in
Yeah.
this, but
No, but what you're talking about is a really good point, which, by the way, the algorithm is scouring right now the comments. So, Elena, I'm going to ask my GPT prompt here. If you could take a look at all the comments and provide me with some winners in the comments for me or in the chat for me, then I will announce some winners before we go to our next panel. That would be fantastic. But the point that you brought up with that, I think sometimes it's really important that there is this delicate line we walk of, yes, you need to treat your stakeholders with the respect of, you know this well, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm more of an expert than you are on this. At the same time, you can't deny the expertise that you bring to the table. And I think that can be a real paradox sometimes where you can put yourself in trouble where you go, well, they told me that I have to do this. And it's like, you're not an empty box. Like, you really do, you should be pushing back and challenging and asking, well, how is this relevant to that kind of a thing? And there's an art and a science to it. But I think you highlight a really important point with this that helps walk that line from either you're a pain in the rear and they don't want to work with you, or you're just like taking orders and throwing it into a course.
Mhm. Yeah. And one more thing to add there is just always tie it back to the goal. What is the goal even for
Yeah.
having a micro learning? So if you understand that, the goal is to keep it simple and to give them something very concise, I think that will
Yep.
also help you to make the case as well.
I completely agree. I completely agree. So well said on that. On the flip side, I did see the comment, but these comments move so quickly it's impossible to keep up. On the
Wild.
flip side, we talked about how to not let it get turned into a Transylvanian Franken course. How do you also balance the other side of that where you don't oversimplify it to the point where you go, this is just too basic? I mean, my 3-year-old could probably find a more valuable resource than this.
Mhm. Yeah, again, I would say, like, what's your learning goal? If your goal is to, identify the top skills for interviewing, make sure that all of that's in there. If that's your goal at the end, what did the learner learn? All of those things that you started out, in the beginning outlining. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay,
Anything
cool.
to
I
add
had
there?
an exercise. No, well, I think, one of the yeah, the oversimplification, I almost feel like that's rarely a problem. I don't know that you ever, I can't think in my career of doing this, a time where I've ever you know what, I just don't have enough information to put in here. Type of thing. It's usually the other one. You're like holding back or the Red Sea before it just knocks you over, type of a thing. So yeah, I don't know that I run into that as much, but I think one of the things that I found was a helpful exercise I used to do, and then I used to do it with all my design teams, was I would push them to take what they had and then cut it in half.
Mm.
And then they would have to do it again. And they used to get really mad. Because I'm like, no, just say it in half as much content and then break it down. Like, how would you say this with less words? Because from an academic standpoint, so often we are trained to just add like junk. I mean, you just find yourself going like, oh, and then maybe I can add like 378 more words to this. And you're like, wait, what is this? Is this even adding value? Like, but we were trained in that in school to go like, well, you got to write a 12-page paper, even though it could have been said in a paragraph. So how do you do that? And I think we have to almost reverse that. So Chris, I think your point right there is spot on. Make it more concise and potent. I like that word, potent.
Yeah.
Any other closing thoughts for folks who maybe have toyed with microlearning or just getting started with it? Because remember, we had a decent chunk who were like, I kind of know, but it's still new.
Yeah. I would say don't be afraid. I think, there's there's something in us that's like, oh, what if it's going to be terrible? Or what if I don't get it right? Just go for it. I think it's a really fun way to get learning across. Especially when you use 7 taps, it almost feels gamified, and I love the format of it. Yeah, so I would just say, like, have fun with it, and tie it back to this goal of like getting learners what they need really quickly and being able to
Okay.
personalize it for them.
Okay. I like that. The experimentation mode. I mean, I'm continually encouraging my teams to try and experiment with things and I think you set up the caveat to that really well, which is make sure you're clear on the goal. Like, don't throw spaghetti at the wall and be like, I don't know, like, let's see what happens. Not so much that, but go, if we were to try this, how can we experiment with different approaches, different styles, see what happens, and then see, what gets things going without the whole fear of like, well, what if it doesn't go well? Okay, then you learn from it and you move on.
Absolutely.
Okay.